And I think there are quite a few indications that those emails were leaked by a DNC employee who was mad that the Hillary Clinton campaign was being helped by the DNC and the Bernie Sanders campaign was being hurt. Very interesting. Very interesting story with a lot of lying and potentially some other things. But I asked him, when you published these emails, did you realize how powerful Hillary Clinton was? And we had a conversation about that, and I said, looking back, do you regret doing that? He goes, honestly, it was fun. And I love that.
This is my video update on this Saturday midday, December the 23rd. Let's talk about some news. And first off, before we get to some news stories, I have a quick update on what is going on with Gonzalo Lira. This is information that was sent to me by his father. And so I'm just going to read you what update I have on Gonzalo. According to Gonzalo Lira Sr., Gonzalo had a court date yesterday, which lasted 5 hours. Gonzalo did not attend this court proceeding because he is in the medical ward with pneumonia. There were 2 representatives of the UN in the court, and the U.S. Embassy followed the proceedings via video links. Gonzalo has his pretrial term, his prison pretrial term, has been extended by another 60 days. This is bad news, but he has been moved into a medical ward because he is suffering from pneumonia, a heavy cold, and heavy coughing since the beginning of December. So that's an update with regards to Gonzalo and what's happening there. All it would take is for the United States, the State Department, to make one phone call, 1 minute, and Gonzalo would be deported. Kick him out of Ukraine. That's what the government should do, the Zelensky administration. That is exactly what they should do. So, Gonzalo's sick. Pneumonia's a big deal. I've had pneumonia. It's rough. It's very, very difficult. So, anyway, he's an American citizen. He's sick. He's being held by the Zelensky regime. 1 phone call from the United States, and he could be deported to any country. Just deport the guy. That's the best solution to this. Anyway, okay. Let's get to some news, and let's start things off with an update on on the situation in the Red Sea. So we started things off with Operation Prosperity Guardian, and a whole bunch of U.S. warships, military assets were moving into the region, and it looked like there was going to be some sort of military strike on Yemen, possibly even Iran. Lloyd Austin said he had built a coalition of 10 countries, and it looked like the war was widening out. I thought it was going to to widen out. I thought the chances were good that it was going to widen out. But over the last week, it looks like Operation Prosperity Guardian, actually over the last couple of days, it looks like OPG is collapsing. Yesterday, the Pentagon said that the purpose of OPG was to escort ships through the Red Sea. And today we are getting reports that various countries in the coalition are now dropping out. France, Spain, and Italy have all announced their withdrawal from the OPG. The three countries stated that they will only conduct further maritime operations under the command of NATO and or European Union and not the United States. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's, trying to think, do I want to walk in that direction or that direction? Let's walk in that direction, since we're already on our way. Yeah, that's a big L for the Biden White House for the U.S. A very big L. The reports are that the countries are withdrawing, not because they don't want war, not because this is not some sort of NATO operation. The reports is that they're withdrawing because the plan sucks. That's what many reports are saying. The U.S. doesn't have enough warships in place. I don't understand what's going on there, but they don't have enough, or they don't have the right warships in place, or they're not properly set up for a strike against Yemen, and the fear is that Yemen can retaliate and can do a whole lot of damage. And basically, these countries that are dropping out, they don't want to take the L. They don't want a bloody nose, so they're pulling out. And they're saying that we're pulling out because NATO's not running this, but it looks like the Biden White House is just not prepared to take on Yemen. Makes you wonder, huh? Anyway, the OPG falling apart. Very embarrassing for the Biden White House. Very, very embarrassing. And even the commercial shippers, the cargo ships, they're also just scrapping the Red Sea now. They're saying, you know what? Let's find alternative ways to get our cargo to where it needs to be. So they're going around the Horn of Africa, of course. They're taking the long route. They're now flying whatever cargo they can. According to Zero Hedge, cargo owners consider air freight alternatives to Red Sea shipping delays. So they're going to use air, and they're saying, you know what? Forget about the Red Sea for now. Let's find alternative methods. I've got an idea for the commercial shippers. Why don't you just ship your stuff with Russian ships? That's one way to get through the Red Sea and to the Suez Canal. Call up the Putin. If you're, I don't know, I've read that IKEA's having a problem, right? Getting their stuff to their stores. So if you're IKEA, IKEA, I don't know how you pronounce it. Anyway, call up the Putin and just be like, look, I understand that the Russian ships are passing through the Red Sea and the Suez. Any chance you can transport some of our desks and chairs and furniture? It's one option. instead of flying stuff around or taking the long way through the Horn of Africa. What an embarrassment for the Biden White House. What an embarrassment. So let's I guess it's a good segue to an update on what's happening in Israel with the war in Israel and Gaza. And let me read you a tweet from the UN chief, Antonio Guterres. 136 of our colleagues in Gaza have been killed in 75 days, something we have never seen in UN history. Most of our staff have been forced from their homes. I pay tribute to them and thousands of aid workers risking their lives as they support civilians in Gaza. A pretty incredible statement from Guterres, huh? The UN had a vote yesterday and they finally passed a resolution. The Security Council finally passed a resolution, but it was a watered down resolution on Gaza. UN Security Council approves Gaza resolution neutered by the US. The UN Security Council has finally adopted a resolution calling for speeding up aid deliveries to desperate Palestinian civilians in Gaza after the US delayed the vote for days and pushed the members to strip the text from any direct calls for a ceasefire or suspension of hostilities between Israel and Hamas. The 15-member council backed the watered-down text in a 13-0 vote on Friday, with both the United States and Russia abstaining. Just prior to the final vote, the US used its veto power to vote down a Russian amendment that sought to reintroduce the call for an urgent suspension of hostilities instead of a vague plea to create conditions for eventual peace. So the Russians abstained because of this framing of the resolution. Urgent suspension of hostilities, and the U.S. insisted on using the words to create conditions. And basically, the Russians said that by using the phrase creating conditions, it basically just allows Israel to continue to attack Gaza as they wish. And that's why the Russians abstained. They said that the wording was too vague, even though they proposed an amendment which was much more specific. Stop the fighting now is basically what the Russians wanted to say. A cessation to hostilities. Stop it now. But a suspension, an urgent suspension of hostilities. But the U.S. they kept on delaying, and finally we had a 13-0 vote with the two countries, the U.S. and Russia, abstaining, and Russia said they watered down the resolution, so it doesn't really hold Israel to account, and that's why they abstained. The U.S. really didn't give a reason why they kept on delaying things, and they got everything they wanted. The U.S. got all the wording of the resolution and all the changes, whatever they wanted, they got. And then when it came time to vote, they still abstained. So the resolution was created exactly as per the U.S.'s specifications. And then when it was time to vote, they didn't vote yes. They abstained. Unbelievable stuff. But you get a resolution. I guess that's the good news, is that you finally get a resolution through the UN Security Council, and hopefully that takes us a step closer to getting a resolution which is much more specific in calling for an end to the hostilities. So that is an update with what's happened at the UN. And the Washington Post Here's an interesting article from the Washington Post. They put out an article with the results of an investigation of the bombing, the attack of Al-Shifa hospital. And let me read you what the Washington Post said in their article. Keep in mind, this is the Washington Post. This is not Alex saying this is the Washington Post. And they investigated the claims that Israel made with regards to the hospital, that there were tunnels underneath and it was being used by Hamas to launch attacks. And the Washington Post basically said that these allegations from Israel, from the IDF, just a bunch of bullocks. Not true. At least that's what they claim. That's what the Washington Post claims. The title of their article is "The Case of Al-Shifa, Investigating the Assault on Gaza's Largest Hospital." Now, this is a long article. It's a very long article. But basically what the Washington Post concludes with their investigation are 3 points. Let me read you the 3 points. Number one, the rooms connected to the tunnel network discovered by IDF troops showed no immediate evidence of military use by Hamas. None of the 5 hospital buildings identified by Hagari, who is, I think he's the IDF spokesman, by Hagari appear to be connected to the tunnel network. And point number 3, there is no evidence that the tunnels could be accessed from inside hospital wards. It's an amazing claim from the Washington Post. The Washington Post. Not me. That's the Washington Post saying this. So that's an update there. Check out the article. Like I said, it's a pretty long, pretty detailed article and investigation. And it just basically says that according to the Washington Post, the reasons for Israel to attack this hospital were unfounded. The tunnels, Hamas, all of these things, according to the Washington Post, they saw no evidence of any of these things. So that opens up a whole lot of other questions, right? War crimes, human rights, all kinds of other things. But anyway, we'll see what happens now if anyone takes notice of this Washington Post article. Meanwhile, we are getting reports out of Saudi Arabia that 96% of Saudis oppose ties with Israel. Hamas grows in popularity according to a poll. Now, this poll was not conducted by Saudi officials or anti-US or anti-Israel officials. This poll was actually conducted by pro-Israel, pro-US officials. A new poll has found that 96% of Saudi nationals believe that Arab countries should cut ties with Israel in response to the war in Gaza, and that the popularity of Hamas has grown significantly amid Israel's devastating military offensive on the embattled territory. The result of the poll, conducted by the Washington Institute of Near Eastern Affairs, a pro-Israel think tank based in Washington, shows the difficulties the United States faces as it pushes for Saudi Arabia to normalize ties with Israel. Prior to the war in Gaza, the U.S. was actively working towards achieving an agreement that would see Israel and Saudi Arabia normalize relations. Yeah, well, that agreement is over. That's for sure. The Biden White House, they really have made a mess of things, especially their relations, the U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia. That's amazing that some people are actually swimming today. It's about maybe like 17 degrees Celsius. Maybe in the sun it gets to 20. I don't know, but it's amazing that people are swimming. I guess why not? I guess 17, 18 degrees is not so bad. Anyway, I wonder how cold the water is. It's not bad, actually. You could probably swim, I guess. Actually, swimming would not be the difficult part. coming out would be the difficult part. I bet you once you got in, it would be nice. But coming out, I don't know. I'll take a pass. All right, so let's talk about the other foreign policy catastrophe of the collective West, of the Biden White House, which is the failure known as Project Ukraine. And we had a bunch of articles come out yesterday, panic articles coming out yesterday, because Project Ukraine is crumbling, or at least the collective West media is finally realizing that Project Ukraine is crumbling. And so they're in a panic. The Financial Times, they put out an article with the title, "What if Russia wins?" And notice the featured image there of the dominoes. The one domino that's going to put all the other dominoes, knock all the other dominoes down, is the colors of the Ukraine flag. So the domino theory. And the article from the Financial Times, not a long article, not a very intelligent analysis. I don't think it was very compelling, but basically it's a bullet point list of what's going to happen to the world if and when Russia wins. And the first like three, 4 points that this article makes, I think it's like five bullet points. And like the first 3 or 4 bullet points are just basic fear mongering. The Russians are going to invade Europe. They're going to plunder and pillage everything, and stuff like that, right? So that's pretty much the first 3, 4 points of the article. Other countries are not going to start invading as well: China, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea. We're just going to see a whole bunch of invasions and conflicts and the domino theory, right? And then you get to like point number 5, and that like takes up 3/4 of this article, right? And it's all about NATO. And that's when you realize that the first 4 points, the first 3 or 4 bullet points, they were just like fillers. What they really wanted to say is that Russia defeating NATO's most powerful proxy, is going to damage NATO in a big way. That's basically what the article wants to say. Countries around the world are going to look at what happened in Ukraine, and they're going to say this bully known as NATO, that has been bullying us all of these many decades, not so tough. And that's the fear. That is the fear. So we had an article from the UK Times as well. Must be a private jet. The UK Times, they put out an article with the title, "Weary Ukraine fears war is extremely unlikely to end in victory." So this article interviews two military officials who are also members of parliament, something like that, or they served in the military and now they're members of parliament of Ukraine. And the Times interviews these 2 guys. One of them is Colonel Roman Kostenko, and basically these 2 parliament officials, they say that the war is lost. It's pretty much what they say in this article. Or Ukraine is losing, and there's no amount of weapons or F-16s or fighter jets that the collective West can give them that will change the eventual outcome, which is a Russian victory. That's basically what these guys say. And what's the solution? According to these officials, the only way to defeat Russia, well, two ways to defeat Russia, according to these officials, is the one way. You get long-range missiles, and you just strike Russian territory. from a distance. It doesn't make much sense to me, because whatever long-range missiles the West were to give Ukraine, Russia has 10 times more and can strike anywhere in Ukraine. So I don't understand why, not to mention that Russia has proven that its air defense is unmatched and it can take out ATACMS and Storm Shadows and Scalp and anything the US throws at it. Yes, every now and then one missile does get through, but for the most part, Russian air defense has been rock solid. But they say that one way for Ukraine to stay in this conflict is to just attack from a distance. The other way, they say, to defeat Russia is regime change. Regime change. We've come full circle now to regime change again as a strategy. This conflict started out with the first 3 months, the collective West hoping that it would overthrow the Putin government. And that was the real goals of this proxy war, was the overthrow of the Russian government. And after a year and a half, we've come full circle back around to the hope. And now we're really talking about a hope that the Russian government will collapse. During the first 3 months of the war, with all of the sanctions and trying to destroy the Russian economy, one could make the argument that, you know what, maybe if the entire Russian economy collapses, maybe something will happen. But the Russian economy didn't collapse. 3.5% growth, outperforming pretty much all of the collective West economies. Well, except for Bidenomics. Nothing can outperform Bidenomics. But yeah, you can make the argument that, okay, I see where they're going with this. They want to destroy the Russian economy, bring people out onto the streets, and get to some sort of regime change. But that didn't happen. But we've come now 2 years later, and the only hope that these parliament members see is for a regime change to happen. That's it. That is it. So this Colonel Roman Kostenko, in this article at the Times, he said, "Who got the idea that we can defeat Russia with dozens of F-16s? He says, ATACMS missiles cannot provide a breakthrough. Combat aircraft, they can only help us achieve parity. We are told that we will get modern F-16 aircraft, but F-16s are aircraft from the 1970s, and Russia has hundreds of 4++ generation fighters. I don't understand who got the idea that we can defeat Russia with dozens of F-16s. So he pours cold water on the whole F-16 thing, which is interesting because Mark Rutte from the Netherlands, he announced yesterday that the Netherlands is ready to provide 18 F-16s to Zelensky. But Mark Rutte said before those F-16s are handed over to Zelensky, he said a number of criteria must also still be met before the delivery can take place, including requirements for personnel and infrastructure. He also said that the Netherlands needs to obtain an export permit from the US. Yeah. Nonsense from Mark Rutte. It's like he's virtue signaling, you know. Yeah, we're ready to give over those 18 F-16s. Yeah, right. First we need a permit, then we need the personnel, then they got to know English, and we need the infrastructure and the airfields, and then we'll give over those F-16s. Meanwhile, you have a Ukraine parliament member, former military official, saying the F-16s aren't going to do anything. Very interesting. And then the Times, they say this from another MP, Mr. Jurash, who says, "We should hope for the best but prepare for the worst. That's the reality of it." His hope for victory is that Russia rebel and change or destroy their own government. Moscow can be taken, just not by our armed forces per se. The hope strategy. Moscow can be taken, just not by our army. Can be taken, but we need a regime change to happen. That's according to this private who's also an MP. Regime change. How can they get rid of the Putin? That's the hope strategy now. Putin, in a statement he gave the other day, I think he said something like the collective West needs to stop dreaming or to stop their delusion that Russia's going to collapse. Even Putin understands where the collective West finds itself with Project Ukraine. Even Putin understands that all they have left is hope. Hope that something inside of Russia happens. Possible? Sure, everything's possible. Everything's possible. Probable? Yeah. Nope. Fico from Slovakia, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, he said that all the weapons in the world will not help Ukraine to defeat Russia militarily. He said Moscow will start dictating the terms of the conflict resolution at the turn of 2023 and 2024, the Prime Minister added. Meanwhile, you have Podolyak, Zelensky's confidant, his BFF. Podolyak, he said that foreign nations should sanction Ukrainian draft dodgers. Men who fled abroad should have their residence permits revoked if they evade service at home. Ukrainian men of fighting age who fled the country amid the conflict with Russia should be forced to return, Podolyak said. A set of restrictions that would limit their access to aid and services in their places of stay is required to achieve this goal, he told Ukraine's Channel 24 in an interview published on Friday. So basically what Podolyak wants, because they can't find soldiers, he wants EU countries to start sending back Ukraine military-aged men to send them back to Ukraine. And one way to do this is for the EU countries to start sanctioning them, to start cutting off whatever aid and money and funds and housing they have in order to force them to return to Ukraine. I don't see how that works. Even if you cut off all these people's aid, the Ukrainian refugees or asylum seekers in the collective West, even if you cut off their housing and whatever money they're getting, why would that force them to return to Ukraine? To do what? To be sent to the front lines? To be annihilated by Russia? Doesn't make any sense, but you can see that Podolyak is getting desperate. And we had the editor of German publication Bild. He was in Ukraine and hung out with the defense minister for 3 days, Mr. Umerov, and he wrote on X, Ukraine, their statements, match less and less the picture that is officially painted in press conferences and interviews, most recently by Ukraine President Zelensky. Basically, what the editor of Bild was saying is that publicly, Zelensky and Ukraine, they say they can win this conflict, but privately, according to the Bild editor, privately, they know they lost. Ukraine officials privately admit they're losing, according to the Bild editor. So that's what he said. And we have Arestovich, who was giving an interview the other day, and he said, Arestovich, Zelensky's former BFF, he said that Kiev is unable to find people willing to fight. He said that 30 to 70% of the troops on the front line refuse to go into combat and seek opportunities to desert. And he also said that the 500,000 mobilization number that Zelensky threw out there during his Q&A was was nonsense. He said basically Ukraine commanders, they told him this 500,000 number, and all it was, according to Arestovich, the Ukraine military commanders trolling Zelensky. That's what he said. Ice cream, €3, €2, $3.50. Fruit salad, $2.50. So, yeah, the military commanders were trolling Zelensky by telling him that he could mobilize 500,000 people. Interesting statement from Arestovich. Let's do one more story, two more stories, and we'll wrap up this video with the clown world. Doing okay on time. So the Biden White House, they're putting in place more sanctions, not against Russia this time, and this is the first. What Biden signed the other day is actually a first. They're putting sanctions in place on secondary sanctions on financial institutions that they believe are aiding and funding and working with Putin's war machine. Yeah, Putin's war machine. And the Biden White House, Biden signed this order, this executive order enabling sanctions on foreign institutions that continue to deal with Moscow. The Deputy Treasury Secretary said that these sanctions will pour sand in the gears of Putin's war machine. They're very descriptive in their language, aren't they? Pour sand in the gears of Putin's war machine. Sand, lots of sand. Lots of sand here to pour in Putin's war machine. So this is a terrible idea. This is an absolutely terrible idea to go after financial institutions, secondary sanctions on financial institutions, because you think they're working with Russia. This is not going to help the US. This is not going to help the financial markets. Financial institutions are not going to be happy about this. And it's the Biden White House, no reverse gear, destroying the global economy, destroying the US economy, destroying trust in the US economy. Financial institutions finding it a pain in the butt to work with the US. I can tell you from firsthand experience that banks here in Cyprus, whenever they see an American passport with regards to opening an account, a bank account, a business account, and you have American shareholders or something like that, the banks are like, oh boy, because of all of the regulations that are in place. Russian passports, the banks are like, nope, can't do anything there. They're losing a whole lot of business, a whole lot of money. All these regulations, all these sanctions, all of these things are just, what a pain in the butt. But, the Biden White House, they just can't stop. This is after we know that the sanctions are not working. So the financial institutions, they'll find workarounds. They'll do business with BRICS, or they'll find ways to open up banks or branches in BRICS nations and do business there. You think you're going to stop them from making money? Anyway, Russia also sent out a warning about seizing the frozen assets. Peskov told reporters yesterday that all the talk about seizing the Russian assets, which is something like 260 billion euros, he said that if the collective West goes through with this, and if they steal these assets, then Russia is going to go after them forever, basically is what Peskov said. They will never rest, according to Peskov, the countries that steal Russian assets. He said that Russia would go after countries in a legal way, but Peskov also hinted that Russia would find other ways to hurt countries that decided to steal Russia's money. I would take Peskov's warnings very seriously if I were any country thinking about stealing Russian cash and Russian assets. Russia will go after the country legally, but Russia probably has 1,000 ways to retaliate against countries that steal their assets. Asymmetric ways. So that was what Peskov said. And finally, one more quick story, and I'll do a quick clown world. This has to do with Rumble and Brazil. From what I understand, the Supreme Court in Brazil, they want to censor certain content creators and certain political speech. And they've requested social media sites to censor content creators, specific content creators. And Rumble said no. So instead of complying with this order from the Supreme Court in Brazil, Rumble said that they're just not going to make their service available in Brazil. Glenn Greenwald tweeted, "Brazil and its Supreme Court are so consumed with censoring political speech. They are constantly ordering platforms to ban voices which dissent, that Rumble made the choice to shut off Brazil, as it did with France, rather than comply with tyrannical orders." And Chris Pavlovsky, the CEO of Rumble, I believe he's the CEO, I know he's the founder, he tweeted, "I will not be bullied by foreign government demands to censor Rumble creators. My statement on turning off Brazil." Good for you, Rumble. Practice what they preach. They preach free speech. And so far, you have to be honest. Rumble practices what they preach. France and Brazil. So that's an interesting development. Good on Rumble. Really, really good on Rumble. Anyway, let's do a clown world. Yeah, I have to wrap this video up. A quick clown world. It has to do with Boris Johnson, who wrote an article. Boris the Clown wrote an article from the Daily Mail talking about UFOs. And let me read you what Slaviangrad said with regards to Boris Johnson's article on UFOs. "And the honorary citizen of Kiev, Boris Johnson, who sent hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to slaughter, continues to amuse the British public. Today on the pages of the Daily Mail, he devoted his next column to examining the pressing question of whether aliens exist. Moreover, it is clear that he had nothing special to write, so he simply argues that such a large space cannot have other types of life." It's very interesting that Boris Johnson pretends as if nothing is happening in Ukraine and he has zero responsibility, accountability for preventing a peace that would have saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lives. He's writing about aliens now. Very shameful. Very, very shameful. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop, 20% off. Use the code Christmas20. Take care.